I will note that on our agenda, it says 9 o'clock. I call the roll. I'm here. John Nigro. Here. Alejandra. Here. Allison.
Here.
Sarah. Jasmine. And Danielle.
Here.
Okay, we have a full board and a quorum. The next item on the agenda is the review and approval of the minutes of our last meeting. Open the floor to any comments, changes, additions anyone would like to make. Hearing none, I would ask for a resolution to approve the minutes of the October 10th, 2024 meeting. Move, second. Okay, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Approved. At this point, we'll turn things over to our council comment.
Morning, everyone. So there's a resolution before you this morning, item number 3, concerning a professional services agreement between the authority and the Advanced Albany County Alliance, LBC. The agreement is attached, it's in your packet, but it's also attachment 1 to the resolution. And this resolution, in sum, provides that the authority would retain the Advanced Albany County Alliance to provide basically all of the staffing services for the authority. The authority has no staff. There are several places, and I cite them in the resolution, where the legislation that created the authority specifically recognizes this special relationship between the Albany County Alliance and the Albany County itself. So you'll see those areas cited in the resolution, and it specifically authorizes what's called a joint service agreement between the authority and the Alliance. And so that's what's before you now in that resolution, and then the agreement is attached. And if you go through the 2 exhibits to the agreement, you'll see the services that are provided. Many of you, if you are familiar with local development corporations or economic development activity in the state, these are common relationships. Often an IDA or a capital resource corporation or something like that will enter into an agreement with the local development corporation to provide staff services. And this agreement is based on that. In addition to the staff services, this provides you a home. It basically provides the real estate that you're sitting in now to use, the conference, the overhead, the facilities here in this office. The cost is $150,000 per year, and Amy can comment on sort of how that number with the staff worked through, and basically that's based on staff time that will be devoted to provide these services to the authority. Now, obviously, we don't have any money right now, so this is all contingent on actually a bonding transaction occurring and having money placed into a bank account that we've established but is currently empty. So, subject to any questions, that's the resolution before the board.
Will this go retroactive when we started?
Yes, sir. It starts on the date of that the governor signed the legislation, because since that time, significant amount of services have been provided to the authority. The Alliance much earlier in the year, authorized its expenditure of resources and services to support this initiative based on the legislation that was passed in June. So the Alliance has been expending those resources since June.
Any questions, discussion? Hearing none, I'll ask for a resolution to approve the professional services. John, second. Okay. All those in favor say aye. Any nays? Unanimous. Dylan? Dylan has some illness, so he's remote. It's all yours, sir.
Oh, kids. Yeah.
You're on, Dylan.
I am.
Yeah, for the underwriter,
The underwriter
Oh, the underwriters,
RFP
right.
update, I'm
So-
sorry.
Sorry, I'm not looking at the agenda. So there was an ad that went out in the TU, for a week. It was also on the contract reporter website, which is this is for the RFP for underwriting services. At this point, the, ad is closed out, but, we still have a period of about 2.5, 3 weeks, that are gonna be open for the, I think it's 2.5 weeks at this point. So we're gonna be preparing an addenda pretty soon. We've received a couple of questions and some inquiries. Looks like we have about 4 responders at the moment, that are potentially interested. It's a lot less than some other RFPs that have been coming out lately, which is probably a good thing. And so we anticipate getting an addenda out next week, and then continuing with our schedule, which puts us in to have an underwriter in place. That would put us to the middle of December, just about, to start working on the contract.
Is there any, Joe, do you have anything you want to add to that? Joe is our bond counsel.
So, thank you, Chair. I have been coordinating with Dylan. Dylan did forward those questions to me that he's gotten from a couple of potential responders. I've given him some suggested responses, and as he said, he's going to be working on an addendum, but things seem to be going very smoothly with respect to the RFP.
Thank you for your help, Joe.
What is the flavor for the underwriters? Is it local or?
Well, I know that there's a couple local, but there's obviously, historically, they've been located in New York City. That's where their main offices are. Many investment bankers and chairs got a tremendous amount of personal and professional background in working with investment bankers. But my expectation is that we'll get a couple of responses from people local, which I think helps by way of responsiveness and commitment and understanding of the local issues.
All right, any other concerns or questions for Dylan? Okay, moving along our schedule. Thank you, Dylan. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Hope you're feeling better soon.
Appreciate it. Thanks.
And your children feeling better soon. Next up is an update on the bankruptcy proceedings, and Peter Pastore, our counsel, is here. Peter?
Good morning, everybody. Without getting into too much detail, you recall that the college filed bankruptcy for Chapter 11 on October 10th, I believe it was. It was kind of a surprise to us that they filed so quickly, and we were kind of a little caught off guard because we hadn't received the JLL report by then. We didn't receive it until just recently. And when we started looking at they filed immediately a motion to sell the real property, as well as the personal property. I think you saw in the newspaper today that Judge Littlefield approved the sale of all the pianos and all of the personal property, none of which we have an interest in. But on the real property side, they proposed and circulated a bid procedure, okay? And you've probably seen those, but they're very voluminous documents. And we received those, and we decided that being a stalking horse bidder would be a good thing for the authority, because if we're a stalking horse bidder and we are not the successful bidder, we're able to recover some of our costs and expenses, because the theory there is that but for our stalking horse bid, they wouldn't have received a higher or better offer. So in looking through that and trying to figure out how we would become a player at the auction, we realized that we would need some kind of relief from some of the conditions to qualify as a bidder. And we were told by the college initially, well, we'll sit down with you and we'll work through those conditions, and hopefully we can mollify them and make them agreeable to your charter. And well, they kind of led us to believe that would happen, but because we haven't gotten them a number, we were concerned that the bid procedures would go forward. And they said, well, we'll work on it once we hear your number. And we didn't feel comfortable kind of waiting until we got to that. So we filed a limited objection last week to the bid procedures. I won't get into all the details, but the main problem we had with it is we're required to make a good faith deposit by the December 4th, December 6th deadlines. We don't have any money. So yesterday the court heard the arguments on our particular situation, and we explained to the court that this is not a private sector auction. We're not a private sector. We don't have cash. We don't have the ability to access that cash. And for some reason, they think that we have like an open checkbook from the county, but we don't. And we made that really clear to the judge. And then the judge played a good role in this. And he looked over at the debtor, College of St. Rose attorneys, and said, well, watch out what you ask for, because if you require this bid, this deposit, and the authority doesn't enter into the deal, you may be left with no bidders for the entire process. So it went back and forth. We adjourned. We came back into court. The debtor said, we'll waive it, but the bondholder said that they would not waive the good faith deposit. And then we asked Judge Littlefield to make a ruling, and he ruled over the bondholders and said, we will not require the authority because of their charter and their specific situation. He recognized all of the kind of regulatory work we have to work through. And I explained to him that it's a perfectly open process. There was the argument that somehow we would have the leg up on everybody by removing that condition. And I explained to the judge, it's not anything we can control. That's our legislative mandate. So anyway, the court approved it, approved the bid procedures. And what's left now is a clear path to becoming the stalking horse bidder or just a general bidder. Some of the other requirements that Joe and Tom and I have looked at that we don't really like in the bidding process, they believe that they'll be able to work with us once we offer them a number and sit down with them and actually work out an asset purchase agreement. There's a form asset purchase agreement. We've already looked at it. We have some comments. One thing they've already caved on is the idea that we would be required to allocate our bid to specific properties. That they've said we don't have to worry about. That's a big deal because we make one bulk bid for all the properties and the creditors can fight about who gets what. Because remember, the bondholders have a lien on certain parcels. The debtor in possession lender, the new party to the game, has a lien on the unencumbered properties. We're not going to get involved with that fight. We're going to offer one chunk of money and then they can fight about it. So I guess my recommendation is, and we basically told the court that by Thanksgiving, we would have some proposal and some negotiations going forward. I think based on everything I'm hearing, we did not get much traction on pushing the process out a month or two. Because I know we got holidays coming up, we've got a board, we've got people who are volunteering, but the court was convinced that we've got to move this along. And he wasn't going to back off on the bid deadlines. So that's where we are. My recommendation is we come up with a number that we feel comfortable with, and I know that's a big challenge. I know that we don't like the JLL report, but based on our charter and based on what this was put together, I think we need to make that first move because they're not going to make the first move. The bondholders are not going to show their cards. I think they're expecting a very robust bid from us because they're owed $50 million.
Could we refrain from talking about the bid process any further until we go into executive session?
Yes.
Because that could affect the negotiations on that.
Okay, thank you.
I just have one question. Why would the bondholders object to our putting up a deposit amount?
You know, my take on that.
Yeah, I'm sorry, let's go into executive session on that too, Harold.
No, this was discussed in open court session, Harold, so I think this is okay. I mean, what they said to Judge Littlefield is that they feared that this would provide a chilling effect on the bidding process. The fact of the matter is, however, there is no mechanism and it's physically impossible for the authority to come up with a deposit. It wasn't like we don't want to, or it's a strategy or something like that. We just don't have, we have no money. There's no way to get it And even if there was a way to get it, there's no way to get it in time to make this December 4th deadline. And I think that's what, why the bondholders kind of persisted in their objection to releasing us from the deposit.
I would just hope to make it clearer, maybe, Joe, you could, that when we say we will get the money. It's, maybe you could just, very concisely explain when we will put the bonds out to market and when we will close, regardless of price.
And
Just so it's clear that we say, we have no money, we have the access to money, it's the process of getting it.
Absolutely right, Chair.
and the fact that we need a
And
project.
that's clear, because there's members of the public need to understand that.
Yeah, absolutely, and, there's been some discussion about that in a prior meeting. That's why we're going through the RFP process for an investment banker. The investment banker is going to assist us in the sale of bonds. When we sell the bonds, we will then have the money for both the purchase price and any deposit, and operating costs, et cetera, et cetera. The reason we don't have the money right now is that we don't have a project. We don't have anything to issue bonds for. The structure of the bond financing is to issue tax exempt bonds under our authorizing statute. And so we've got New York state law requirements and we have federal tax law requirements. And one of the ones particularly applicable here is a federal tax requirement, which indicates that we can't issue bonds unless we have a project. And our project is going to be the acquisition of the campus at a particular price. And once we know that, we will then have a project. So as we go through the RFP process, get the investment banker, and as we go through the bidding process and come up with a number, and I mentioned this at our last meeting, there's parallel paths here of what we're doing. And so we will ultimately have the money, as the chair indicates, but we need to go through a process because we're a government, as Peter indicated and made forcefully to the bankruptcy judge. We're not a private sector entity. We're a government. We're subject to a number of requirements that the private sector is not subject to, and that's just, those are just the facts.
And I think just to add to that, Peter made a great argument to Judge Littlefield in that, the authority has one purpose in life, right? It's to purchase these properties. So we're not a frivolous bidder, and the rationale for a deposit is to make sure that the bidder is serious and that they've got some skin in the game. Well, that's probably a good thing to do for private bidders, but for us as an authority, it's pretty much assured that if there is a project, as Joe says, we will be able to fund the acquisition. I think, Judge Littlefield kind of understood that and drove it away. The main reason that I believe, and Peter, you correct me, that Judge Littlefield agreed with the college on the time frame, because one of the things, December 4th is literally around the corner, with Thanksgiving in between here, this is a very short time frame. But apparently, the loan agreement that the college has with the debtor in possession financer, the so-called DIP lender, a group, I think it's Summit Partners, has a condition of their loan is that schedule. So if they would have changed that schedule, they would be in violation of their loan agreement with Summit Partners, which has already been approved and in place. So Peter, would you agree with that? That was kind of what motivated?
Yeah, this was all on the record yesterday, and it's all public information.
Right.
And anybody can get a copy of the transcript. The Times Union reporter was there. And
Okay. Thank you.
you're welcome.
Are there any questions for anyone from any of the board members at this point on this process? Hearing none, we'll move on to the CFO report. Amy?
Good morning, everyone. In your packet this morning is a draft operating budget for 2025 through 2027. This is just an operating budget to keep the college running. Dylan worked on a lot of these numbers. I'll just run through it briefly. We have computer and internet for $45,000 total for the 3 years, and it's our hope that in 2027, possibly 26, these numbers could decrease, due to selling off the properties. We have the alliance agreement in there for the,
What's that? Yeah, do you have copies of this? Does everybody have a copy of the budget?
Says confidential on it.
Great, thank
Um,
you. No, it's okay.
so running down the line, we have budgeted for computer and internet, which would include alarm systems and fire suppression, the agreement with the alliance that was discussed earlier, some maintenance with elevators, fire extinguishers, property insurance, and is one of the bigger lines. We have in place now our D&O insurance, which is with Greenwich Insurance. This may also increase the premiums once we have, if and when we receive the money to purchase the properties. Legal line is $241,000 for the 3 years. We also have some landscaping and waste removal, snow removal, which could be bundled into eventually a property management agreement if that comes to fruition. And pest control as well, security, to keep the building safe and whatnot. And then some small lines of water treatment with cooling towers and other systems that may require maintenance. So overall, we're looking at, if it did go out for the 3 years, roughly $7 million, $2 million for 2025. And then there's a built-in increase of 3% and 4.5% over the next 2 years.
This is a work in progress here.
Yes.
This is not final. I still think this sounds high, but it is significantly less than what the college has budgeted for the same services. The reason for the significance of this in the first instance is that this amount of money would be folded into our bond issuance and capitalized, because again, it's the only source of revenue that the authority has to do any of this stuff. So, one of the things that Amy and I were talking about this morning is that over time, I would hope and expect to see the operating costs going down, because as buildings are sold off or as they become used, they would be somebody else's responsibility to operate and maintain. So, you would hope that over a period of time that these would be kind of, going down. But, again, this is just kind of to give the board a sense of, our present thinking on, what it costs. This is, 93 buildings, I think we're talking about. The other thing, that came up, and I have to admit, I didn't really fully appreciate this. But Peter made a comment to Judge Littlefield that this is probably the largest bankruptcy real estate disposition in the local history of the bankruptcy court.
I don't think there's any question about that.
Yeah. So, being as close to it, we kind of sometimes forget, the magnitude and the significance of this. But this is as they say, a BFD, big deal. So, this is, just something that's going to be, there's no blueprint for this, and there's no, as best we can tell, there has never been an authority created to purchase the assets of a college in New York State or anywhere else. So, what you're doing here is really, the first, and, just just in case you were starting to feel comfortable about things. You know, these are uncharted waters.
You can opt out.
No, you cannot. No, you cannot. This is a mandatory sentence you have here.
Kevin, this budget, seems to me that the DIP loan is really an overlap here. The DIP loan is for 270 days, which is 9 months for last week. So this is 2025. There's got to be some adjustment there.
Well, you know, depending on, I think the DIP loan was, and again, I don't want to talk on behalf of the college, and maybe Harold knows this, but I believe the DIP loan was, the term of the loan was to cover just that period from now until when the college closes on the campus. So it would, you know, drop off or go away. So however much of that, if it was the full 9 months, it would be the $10.8 million, I guess. If it was, you know, shorter than that, it would be reduced by some amount. But we would not be paying any, there's no debt service in here reflected for the DIP loan. That's the college's indebtedness.
No, but I'm saying at some point that if we were to take possession by January, some of that DIP loan, I think would collapse somewhere.
Correct.
And then we would be picking up these expenses somewhere in 25.
Right.
Or the opposite is if we don't,
Right.
then our expenses get pushed off to later in the year. or
That's
next
correct.
I had a question about the security costs. And how they keep increasing. Is it private security? How, was there some explanation of what that?
I'm gonna throw that to Dylan.
Thanks for asking that question. Actually, I was just going to try to interject and say, hey, there's a couple of costs here that are going to come stand out at you. If you guys can hear me, sorry. The security cost itself is taken directly it's a continuation of the current situation because it's very difficult to sort of project how our security is going to look when there's a lot of different options available to us. And that's something that the board's going to have to make a decision at some point if we get the properties. Currently, St. Rose has a number of people in-house that they pay. And so their line item would include a lot of different things that have to do with payroll, all that type of stuff. Just keep in mind that the issue with security is that they rely upon manpower, more or less, to sort of prevent crime and to sort of react to it. So it's a very open campus. They have a lot of people on staff that are currently always on. So there's always a presence, and they have multiple cars, things of that nature. So that number I would suspect would come down. However, it really depends upon how we want to approach security. And I assume that we would also be working with a property manager who would have some thoughts on that and how to maybe bring that down technology as well. So I didn't want to presuppose anything, I guess what I'm saying.
You know, again, this is a work in progress, and any of these questions, you know, we will be working on, and you know, that's a good one to look into. Because there are some other options too that, you know, I mean, you know, you may decide if we're successful in getting the campus that we just send out an RFP for, you know, property management services to have some private property management come in and maintain the campus for us. You know, that's a decision to be made at some point in the future.
One of the things we might do is look at what they're doing now and see whether or not we would agree with what their expenses
Right.
are.
You know, and the other thing, you know, is, you know, any of you who've, you know, owned properties, and particularly, you know, older properties, there's usually a person or two who knows all the secrets and all the unwritten things about the buildings. And I'm told that there are a few of those people still around that might prove very helpful in maintaining and
Well,
operating.
they might be interested in working directly.
They've done a really great job so far.
Yeah,
Along with the Albany Police Department, they've really kept our property safe, so
yeah, that's
definitely
it.
appreciative of them.
Security is very important if we take possession. Because, you know, all those standalone buildings, they're, you know, I drive through there every day. And, you know, it's looking great, but, you know, all of a sudden, I worry about fires and things of that nature. Fire suppression systems, if all those standalone buildings are on smoke detectors and they're not hooked up to some sort of central, alarm system. A fire alarm could be going off or something and nobody hears it, nobody knows about it. We got some challenges when we take possession in terms of managing this property. Big challenges.
I think landscaping and maintenance too is something that you have to really factor in, because the look and feel of that block is so
Absolutely.
dependent on how that college feels and streetlights and, lighting and.
All that.
To me, this is like an acquisition of real estate at some point. And at some point, if we're gonna go forth with it, I assume we're gonna have a period of time to have inspection, to at least understand what we're buying.
Yeah.
That's-
Talking about swimming pools and all kinds of things that when they go wrong, they're expensive to fix.
Well, roofs
Roofs are another issue.
And listen, there are buildings here that date back to the 1920s. There's some new buildings, but some of these buildings are old. And,
We're gonna probably wanna know what we're buying at some point.
And they
and have
will
it
bring, those older buildings will bring some decisions that we have to make that, may be unpopular.
And one of the other issues here, which is something that's going to have to be figured out, is many of these buildings are served on a single, HVAC system or mechanical system. So that is, if a boiler goes out, it may not just affect one building. So there's some, this is something that needs to be paid close attention to.
Are there any, buildings on the historic register on the site? I know John might know. I know like the old library might be
Yeah,
one of
Danielle,
the-
you might know, but I don't believe so.
Yeah, I don't believe so. We were discussing, the possibility of moving forward with that process with some of the buildings, but it hadn't happened.
Okay. Could unlock
It's eligible. It's eligible to be a district, potentially, which would probably be the best way to do it instead of trying to do each individual building. However, nothing's on the registry as of yet. And the one point, just because I think it's a really important point that John and Nick and everything, the best thing we can do to get this budget down is to do an actual, a property, not an inspection, but really to do an assessment. To bring in an engineer to look at the mechanical systems, to have recommendations, that kind of stuff, to basically say, this has got a useful life left of this has got, and then you would basically create a capital plan to decide, are some things worth investing in, fixing up in order to keep costs down, set a, determined length on your ROI. We want to have everything paid off within a year, et cetera. And then there's probably technology that we could be implementing to kind of, to make this cheaper and also run more efficiently. And I just want to raise, there's three main costs, like to that effect. There are three things that are really driving up the price. You have almost 20% of the budget wrapped up in insurance. You have 20% wrapped up in security, and then 20% wrapped up in, what is this like? Oh, utilities. And so there's a lot of room there to make an impact. So I just don't feel comfortable assuming anything at this point in time right now, because we don't know enough about what the buildings entail.
Kevin, your point about utilities could be tied into several buildings, that's why it came out in the newspaper today, and I heard it yesterday, it was a $6 million, that's an empty bid, that person.
Could we wait till executive session and talk about other bids?
Whatever it
Because
is,
I think that's more appropriate.
well, it's public information.
Well,
Newspaper.
I think the point about, looking to set up the property for its best redevelopment going forward, being able to line us up for historic tax credits, for instance, is critical. And I wonder if we're missing a line item here. I do see marketing and PR with Baker Associates, that's more on the sort of media and in general, but a line item that could allow for marketing of the properties, whether it's a consultant to help us with the district proposal, move forward, some of those more third-party pieces that the Alliance would need to farm out, to position us
Yeah.
in the best place. I don't want to shortchange us in the budget going forward. Those are always things that we can add in, but if this is, rolling up into what we would bond for, being able to have sort of a pool that we could tap into for those other resources may be helpful.
Not the least of which is going to be the public engagement process. That's usually something that we would contract out to have done by those companies that we all know who do that kind of thing. So, good point. We'll
rework it to include some.
We do have a contingency line at the bottom. We put in 10% for any, unknowns. But that could be eaten up by that alone, right?
That could be eaten up by, as well with
Right.
utilities or property
Right.
maintenance or.
But no, we will definitely add those lines.
That wasn't intended to hold any of the project costs. It was just intended as a contingency on these operating expenses separately. We've talked about that.
We'll note that and, maybe bring back a revised budget on a monthly basis. I think that's
Okay.
very important to us. Any more thoughts, comments on the budget? Okay, maybe you wanted to cover the D&O insurance.
Yeah, just an update. I mentioned earlier, we have been insured with Greenwich Insurance. And that's policy is good for a year. Like I said, the premium could go up a year from now when we have the revenue. And it includes, what was requested, including the coverage for the defense of all of the board members.
So we can all sleep at night?
You can.
We have a policy somewhere in a drawer somewhere?
We do. Yep. And one other thing I'd like to mention that's not on here, I was successful in opening up a bank account with M&T Bank. Of course, there's nothing in it right now, but Kevin has been added as a signer, so I was going to request that the chair and treasurer also be added as signers to the account.
Whatever's legally required.
Okay. Yep. So I'll, you'll get an email with the request for the information needed to add you, and then
Tom, we don't need.
And the
any
board
resolution.
authorized that during the first meeting.
Yes.
So we're all set. Yes.
We're squared away on that.
okay. That's it for me.
Kevin?
Yeah, thank you, Nick. Again, thanks everybody for coming this morning and having a full board complement. I think that's really important. We have a small board and we've got big issues. And you are all going to be, asked about this and talked to about this. So I think it's important that we continue to try to have, 100% attendance at our meetings, and we will work the meetings to ensure that, that it's at a time and a place that's convenient for everybody to get here for each of the meetings. We are going to go into an executive session to discuss some issues regarding the negotiations with the bondholders. I just, the thing that's on my mind the most is the short amount of time that we have to conclude our negotiations with the bondholders and with the college. We have to have we have to have this done and ready to go by December 4th as a stalking horse bidder, and December 6th, I believe, as just a regular qualified bidder. And that's not just, we agree on a number. There's got to be a purchase and sale agreement associated with that as well, doesn't it, Peter?
Yes.
So, this is something that, of course, our lawyers are going to have to be engaged, and, any of you who've, worked on any type of large contract that requires negotiation knows that it can just drag on. Our vice chairman suggested that, we just, kind of corral everybody, get them in the room and just drive to a conclusion on that. But that's my biggest concern right now, that we have, that we just don't run out of time. that there's just not enough runway for us to get to where we need to be, because one thing we've confirmed, the timeframe that the college laid out, again, took us a little bit by surprise, is not adjustable. So, that's the biggest part of
Well,
what
to your point, our next formal meeting is beyond bid.
Well, we're gonna have, we
So we-
understand, we need to, we're probably gonna have to have more than one more meeting.
And, this will require, again, unfortunately, none of this can be done, remotely. It has to be bodies in room, in person. So, and I mean, I know this time of year is not, we're a couple weeks away from Thanksgiving and,
Yeah.
right, so.
Like to cancel that Thanksgiving dinner.
We're just having kids, get rid of
It's got a beautiful home there.
Not
That
ideal.
house looks very comfortable.
No.
But, it is important that, when we do schedule a meeting, that we make, every effort to, I really want this to be unanimous and not necessarily unanimous, but I want everybody on this board to participate and be involved. I don't want to hope that we don't have just a quorum to make probably the most important decision we're going to make, at least in the short term, which is what we're going to put down.
Just the last item on in my report is just, is there anything in the board materials or the scheduling that you need that you're not getting? I want to make sure that you have all the information necessary for you to make the best decision that can be made. And if there's, if the way the information is getting to you or the way it's formatted is not, suited to your, best understanding and consideration, just let us know. Again, this is, we're barely, 3 months old?
We're feeling our way over.
Right, so.
Just walking now.
On our hands and knees.
So any suggestions or thoughts, if you don't want to say it here, shoot me an email or Dylan, and we'll factor that in. So,
Antina has done a really great job of keeping us all informed and having the board documents available. And
Right.
we really appreciate having the schedule posted on the website too. So that's something that we're happy to see too.
How's the food in the neighborhood?
Good, we're doing well.
You see anything going on that you want to?
No, I mean, knock on wood, it's been very quiet, again, just in case. But yeah, so far it's been the usual
I
the
hope,
past few months.
I just want the neighborhood, and I go through there every day, so to be comfortable that we are, are moving forward. But again, and we all have, it's good to communicate that we are a public entity. And we have to do things that a public entity is legally required to do. And sometimes you need to have patience, with us. But we want to make this happen. And, okay,
one
Kevin,
last thing,
you're still on.
we are on track to have the debt service agreement approved by the county, which is expected on December 2nd. So, again, we're double tracking things as we go along, as Joe was saying, and, that all, we haven't heard any pushback or any issues that have arisen out of that process. So we look like we're in good shape on the front. So that ends my presentation. Mr. Chairman. Sorry?
Whenever I went to a closing to buy something, I always had money. This is a little different.
Yeah, right.
Any other business from the board? Hearing none, seeing no hands raised, public comments, any members of the public that are here, we would like to hear from you. Sir?
Hi, I'm BJ Costello. Many of you know me. I've been involved with the South School for 40 years, and there's a building called the Amphion House named after a brother who walked around with a tin cup to raise money for LaSalle, which we sold to St. Rose maybe 25 years ago. It's right side of the LaSalle property. It's right across from the gym, College St. Rose. And
Is that one of the houses?
yes, it's a house. It's the first house after LaSalle School if you're going west.
Right.
And so we owned it, we built it, and we sold it, but we went back. So I just make that point to put in your head someplace that there is a high interest from LaSalle School to add that to their campus.
Would you buy the whole thing?
You and I, wait, you and I. You and I.
Then we can piece off the piece.
It is part of it.
Yeah.
We'll note that in the record, and when we get to that point, we'll certainly be.
Yeah, thanks. And just so you know, I mean, I was Danielle's predecessor. I started the Pine Hills Neighborhood Association in 1972 and have been involved and lived in the neighborhood all that time and go by it like you every day and think about it a lot. So we really appreciate everything you're doing here. And it's been very open, and I think this is a great board and great leadership, so I'm with you. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. At this point, I would ask for a motion to go into executive session.
Yeah, the reasons, we have three.
Yes, oh, I'm sorry.
Yes, sir. So the reasons for the executive session would be to discuss ongoing litigation, there's a bankruptcy litigation with the Pew. Second reason would be to discuss the potential acquisition of real estate, the publicity of which would substantially affect the value thereof. And third would be to seek and receive legal advice from counsel. So those three. Okay.
Before we cut off the session here, if Dylan, and I believe, Harold, are you still on the call? Harold isn't?